So what do we do when it's too rainy and stormy outside to go take pictures? Well, we get out a bunch of old cameras and we look at them. Today we're looking at 35mm folding cameras. Let's get started. Hey, thanks for joining me. So, the weather's really nasty outside. That's the way kind of fall is in Oklahoma when it starts out. The cold weather battles against the warm weather and we get storms. So, I got some cameras out this morning. I wanted to kind of go over, kind of got an idea. One of my favorite cameras are 35mm folding cameras. They're really some of these made in the 50s after World War II, just beautifully made by some of the German manufacturers. Just really gorgeous. You can find these pretty affordably, and often you can find them in good working order, and they're just fantastic to use. And what's so cool is how small they get. I mean, look at this thing. You could easily put this in a jacket pocket and have a quality 35mm camera to carry around with you to take pictures with. So I've got several of these I want to look at. I don't have everything that's made in 35mm folding cameras, obviously, but I've got a good sample and we can talk about some of the others. So I'm going to let you see top of my workbench here. I've got the cameras laid out, and we're going to kind of talk about some of these. And these might be something you want to add to your collection if you want something that you can slip in a jacket pocket, have with you when you're out, and shoot 35mm film. So let's get started. Before we do, if you would, please click on the like and subscribe buttons, and let's get started. Okay, let's take a look at some of these cameras. The first one I want to look at is this Zeiss Ikonta 35. The actual model number, and Zeiss prints this in leather. It's kind of hard to see here, but it's 522/24. And it's a small folding, look how tiny this thing is. Small folding 35mm camera. You pull down on this little button right here at the top. Front opens up. Little ribbed panels on the side here. You squeeze, there's one on each side. You squeeze in a little bit and it unlatches and closes. Isn't that gorgeous? The engineering on these is just fantastic. They're so beautiful. Controls are pretty simple. This thing has a lever you pull down here to take a picture. You actually turn the front element to focus, and then you can set your shutter speeds with this dial on the front, or this knurled ring on the front, and the apertures, there's a knurled, you can see the knurling on it here. You can use to change the apertures. So really just beautifully made. This is just a little film reminder dial up here. You advance the film with this. You can see this actually has somebody's name engraved on it here, Roy Green. Whoever did this did a really nice job of engraving it, so it wasn't done with a scratch awl or something, but it's got someone's name on it. Anyway, you advance film here, you rewind over here. When you go to rewind, you actually push this button in the middle of the wind knob, and that unlatches the film sprocket, the film advance, so it can rewind. And the little latch here you pull down to open the back door. Your film cartridge goes over here. You hook your film on this side and wind it up. As the film goes across, it'll turn these little sprockets, and as these turn and you're winding, when it gets to the frame, it stops and locks. And that also, it has a double exposure prevention, also allows you at that point, you can cock the shutter, focus your image, and then pull down on this and take a picture. Now, this focusing on this is really just, well, some people call it zone focusing. I call it guess focusing. You're basically just supposed to set the distance on the scale. Maybe scale focusing is the right word. They do make little accessory range finders like this one. And this, you look through this. It's got two windows on the front. And you turn this knob until you are in focus, and then you can read the setting on this knob here, wherever you're focused, and then transfer that setting to the settings on the lens up here. So that's not the fastest kind of situation, but it's quite doable. And after doing this just a little bit, it's actually pretty snug in there. After doing this just a little bit, you get to where you can, that's why I call it guess focusing. You can guess the distance pretty accurately if you practice that a little bit. So anyway, this has what I think some would call a very tiny little viewfinder to look through. And the truth is, if you're wearing glasses and you put your eye up to this with glasses on, you're not going to see the whole frame. I'm a bit nearsighted and I do wear glasses, but I'll just pull my glasses up on top of my head and get my eye right up to this. And if you get your eye right up to it, then you can see the whole frame. And it's not bad to use, really. I know some people, if you're used to the big, brilliant viewfinders on a 35mm SLR or a DSLR or something like that, you might say this is really kind of tiny, but you know, photographers use these for a lot of years and they were quite successful with them. And so it will work. This does not have, you'll notice, does not have a tripod socket. Actually it does. If you coin slot it here, if you take this screw out, you can literally mount it upside down on a tripod. That's kind of stupid, so I probably would never do that. But this is camera, you know, literally you can put this in a jacket pocket. It's so tiny. And take pictures. Now this has a lens. The lens is a Novar Anastigmat 45mm f3.5. The Anastigmat, Novar Anastigmat, is a 3-element lens called a Cook triplet is the formula. And you know, don't be deceived by that. If you stop this thing down past say f8, you know, if you can shoot at f8 or 11 or 16, even at 5.6, it's going to take really great pictures. Wide open, it's going to be kind of soft at the edges. But these cameras, if you stop them down a little bit, just take fantastic pictures. Next one is this Zeiss Icon Contessa. And you'll see the connective tissue between the two in a lot of ways. Opens the same way. The difference is it has this thing sticking up here and a rangefinder window. So when you look through the viewfinder, you're actually seeing a secondary image in the middle of your view. That as you turn the focusing ring on this, you'll actually see that that secondary image move back and forth, and you line up the secondary image with the main image, and when the two coincide or line up, you're then in focus. Otherwise, controls are very similar. You know, kind of a ribbed or knurled ring to set your shutter speeds, and then another knurled ring to set your apertures. Same kind of shutter release. This did have a meter. Sadly, the meter no longer works in it, which is kind of sad. And somebody really scratched up the shoe in this. But I got it really reasonably. Film reminder dial. It opens up in the back here. It opens up much the same way. Has the same little sprocket things as you wind. And, you know, you load your film the same way in it. So, just beautifully engineered. These things are just so precision, so beautifully made. Kind of hard to imagine anything being made like that today. Just gorgeous. These are both made by Zeiss Icon. This one does have a tripod socket. When you have this open, tripod socket's right there in a more logical place. It also has a little kickstand back here. So when you've got the camera open, if you're wanting to stand it up, just set it on a surface to take a picture, this little kickstand keeps it from tilting backwards. Kind of an interesting thing that's a little hard to push back in. There we go. It actually has an arrow. It shows you push that way and then in. And it goes right back in. Anyway, made in Germany by Zeiss Icon. Just beautifully made. This one is 533/24. This is known as the Contessa. Okay, we'll set those aside. The next two I want to talk about, actually three, but we'll start with these. These are Kodak Retinas. Now the Retina was made in Germany. Kodak actually bought a factory in Germany. They bought the factory in 1931. It was called Nagel Camera Works. It was renamed Kodak AG Dr. Nagel Work after Kodak bought it. And they started making these cameras starting in 1934. I think they continued to like 1969. There's different variations. And some of the early pre-war ones, you know, had knob winding. You'll see this model designations like this is a 1A and this is a 2A. The difference is they're basically the same camera, well, nearly the same, except this one has a rangefinder and a little bit better lens. This one has just a viewfinder. Same thing like the little Ikonta 35. You can put an accessory rangefinder on here. These have a button on the bottom. You press here to open. and they pop open. Now this one has a Schneider Xanon 50mm f3.5 lens. Now the Xanon is a 4-element tester type prescription. And I didn't mention the Contessa. The Contessa actually has a Zeiss Opton Tessar, and the Tessar is a 4-element lens known for extremely good image quality. And so is the Xanon lens on this Retina, known for great image quality. They have a synchro compure shutter. Very similar to the others, you have a dial up here. You can set your shutter speeds. As you turn this ring, you can actually see the shutter speeds on this dial. And then, let me turn it around where you can actually see the numbers. So you've got like 1 second to a 500th of a second. Apertures down here at the bottom. These have a little knob right here that you turn to focus. And a couple things to know about these when you go to focus. Really best, well, you have to, you set this at infinity focus, and then there's a button on the top and the bottom, and you squeeze those 2 buttons in, and then it will close. Trying to force it closed otherwise will break something for sure. So push the button on the bottom, pull this open, and then if you go to close it, you got to make sure it's focused all the way to infinity, and then you can push those buttons. If it's not at infinity, the buttons won't push. So all the way to infinity, and then you can close it. So these have lever wind, shutter release button. The film rewind knob has kind of a film reminder on the top of it. Some of the film names are kind of interesting. Super Double X, Plus X, Infrared, Kodacolor Daylight, Kodachrome A, Pan X, and so it's some interesting film names. My favorites of the Kodak line that have lever wind are the 1A and 2A. And we're going to talk about that here in just a little bit when we look at a later version. These open with a little lever. You pull down here. The back opens. Very conventional in terms of the film. You push this up, you put your film in over here, bring it across, hook it to the spool, and then wind. Now, one of the things that's unique about these is they have a countdown counter. So this is at like frame 2 or 3 right now. So if I take a picture and wind, now it's on 1, take a picture, wind, take that last picture. It's going to get to the very end here. Well, no, I may be backwards. Anyway, when you get down to, I have to play with this counter. When you get down to the last frame, the wind lever will lock. There it is. Well, I'm almost there. Yeah, there it's well, it skipped over it. Anyway, it's supposed to lock when you get to the last frame. I haven't really shot this camera that much. There it is. It's locked. So these have a countdown film counter, and so when you get to the last frame, it locks it up. And one of the interesting things is I bought this one at a Goodwill store, and it had counted down to the last frame, and it was locked up. And the people at the store couldn't make it work, so they sold it for like $8. And we're going to look at this camera here in just a second. But be aware that on the Kodak Retinas, these lever wind ones, they have a countdown film counter, and if when it goes to the last frame, it locks the camera up. Now, from time to time, using the camera, you'll find that the camera will lock up, and it just seems inexplicably locked. That's what this extra button is for. This is the craziest thing. But if the camera won't work, you press this button, it releases the wind mechanism so you can wind it again. It seems odd to me that they would engineer a camera that they knew was going to lock up, and so to fix it, they made a workaround of a release button. This is not the release button you use to rewind the film. That's down here. That's on this little button. Hold this button in while you rewind the film. This is just a oh shit button, the camera's locked up, and so now I have to unlock it. So that's what that button's for. I think you can also use that button to do double exposures, and that may be a more reasonable reason to have it there. But from time to time, you'll actually see one of these things just lock up kind of inexplicably, and you can press that button. It allows you to rewind and cock the shutter again, and then it goes on. So kind of weird. I would imagine Kodak probably sold that as a double exposure feature, but I think universally it's kind of known as a problem solver. Anyway, these take beautiful pictures. You know, again, not quite as compact as something like this, but they are very compact and quite affordable. The 2A, like I said, has a rangefinder, so you've got two windows here. Like the Contessa, you've got a secondary image that moves in your view. The thing that's kind of notable about the 2A and some of the ones that have a 2 or 3 designation on the model number is this Schneider Xanon. And so instead of Xanar, it's an Xanon lens. And this lens is a 6-element Gauss design symmetrical lens. It's a very advanced formula. And so it's also a lot faster. It's f2 at 50 millimeter. And so these have a much faster lens that you can shoot pretty much wide open. The image quality is just fantastic on these. Same controls, focus here, turn this outer dial to set your shutter speeds. Apertures are at the bottom here. Same kind of way, little lever. And again, you've got to make sure you're at infinity before you close the camera. Otherwise, the wind, the film loading, and everything's pretty much the same. This is my favorite version of the Retina, or Retina, however you want to say it, for a couple of reasons. There are later versions. This is a 1B. There are later versions that have some other features. The 3 series, the 3B and the 3C, and especially the last version, 3C with a capital C on the model number, have much bigger, brighter viewfinders. You know, the window's not so squinty. They're a little easier to use with glasses. They have, this one has a Xanar lens, which is the 4-element Tesser. And these later ones have removable front elements, and you could get different focal length front elements. You could get a telephoto, you could get a wide angle. And so, you know, they had that advantage of interchangeable front elements, so kind of like interchangeable lenses. Same focusing mechanism, a little bit bigger button to press on the top and bottom to close, but you have to do it the same way. The difference is the wind lever is now at the bottom, which is kind of weird, right? The problem with these, and the reason I if you have one that works, be gentle with it. The wind mechanism on these is known to strip out. So there's a shaft that goes up through here with a gear, and then there's a rack that moves back and forth, and that rack turns another shaft that turns the gear that actually cocks the shutter up here. It's a pretty complex mechanism. But the rack in these is known to strip out. And at this point, there's just very few parts around to fix these. And that's what's wrong with this one. The rack is stripped out in it. And so I don't know. I haven't really tried to go out and search for parts. They're probably out there. But these later ones too, they have a kind of a hidden button here that you use to open the back. Film loading is pretty much the same. Rewind button down here, tripod socket. But so if you have one of these with the bottom wind lever, and if it works and it feels smooth, so let's say you find one at a garage sale, and it winds and it feels smooth, be gentle with it. It'll probably last fine. If you're concerned, you could take it to a camera repairman and make sure that it's cleaned and lubed properly and the rack is adjusted so that it's not going to strip out. What happens is they get dry and old and they start getting hard to wind, and that can be because the shutter needs to be cleaned and lubed, and people force them to wind, and then it strips out the rack. So if you have one of these that works good, that's fine. And if it's nice and smooth and not hard to turn it, you're in good shape. If it works but it's kind of stiff, get it to a repair person to clean and lube it before you damage it. And so these are good cameras. They just do have that weakness. The top lever cameras, some people have thought that they have the same issue with the rack not not being as robust, but the actual the 2 series, the 2A, the 1A that have the top lever wind, all those that have the top lever wind actually are a bit more robust, and generally they don't have a failure. Now if you let everything get all gummed up in the shutter and it's really hard to turn, you can damage something if you force it. So never force anything on a camera. let's talk real quick about how you buy one of these. So if you find one of these like I did at a thrift store, you want to test it to make sure the shutter runs smoothly. I'm going to be quiet here and see if you can, I don't know if we can hear this. Pretty quiet. I don't know if you can hear it, but you should hear a smooth, continuous buzzing sound, and the shutter should open and close for, you know, if you set this at 1 second, it should open and close for about 1 second. That might be just a tiny bit slow, but it runs real smoothly. And, you know, if the controls all work smoothly, and the viewfinder, if it's got a rangefinder, if that is clear to see and it works smoothly. This one I got, it literally needed no work at all. It has worked beautifully ever since I got it at the Goodwill. All I had to do was move the counter off the last frame and it started working. I didn't show that to the people at Goodwill, unfortunately, but unfortunately for them. So that's kind of it. These are some really neat cameras. If you're looking for you know, a pocketable camera. There are some others. There's Voigtlander made a Vito line of very compact cameras with different kinds of viewfinders. So the Voigtlander Vitos are great cameras. I just don't have one. They also made one called the Contessa that had a really long button that popped out of the top of it that you actually push that button down and it wound the camera and cocked the shutter. It was kind of a goofy thing, and it has a double trap door thing that the lens pops out. They're a little bit bigger, a little bit longer, but the Contessa is another one. Agfa made a couple of them. They made the Solonet line, and the Solonet would have a viewfinder like this, and the Super Solonet, you know, would have a rangefinder, you know, like one of these. Later they came out with the Regent and the Super Regent. They were just kind of newer versions of the same kind of cameras, you know, folding cameras. And then there's some other brands. Welty made some. Some of those are a little less common, and there's all kinds of kind of lesser known, you know, German cameras, folding cameras that were made. These are probably these Retinas are probably the most common you're going to see. You just find them all the time. They're not hard to find. And, you know, if you buy one of these online, make sure, you know, they're telling you that it works in all regards and they have a good return policy. If you find one like at a garage sale or a flea market, thrift store or something, generally speaking, if one of these needed a complete CLA, it might start getting to be a bit more than you might want to spend. These Contessas are pretty valuable, so, you know, they're worth spending some money on, as are the ones that have a rangefinder typically are worth quite a bit more. But like I bought this one, and I used to repair cameras, so I didn't have any problem taking the shutter apart and lubing it, got it going. This one worked as is, as did this one. So I bought 3 of these literally at different places. This from an antique flea market, this one from a used camera store, this one from Goodwill, and they all worked fine without needing any attention. So you can find them that are really, you know, in working shape and ready to go. Anyway, there's some folding 35mm pocket cameras. Really fun to use. Well, there you go. Some of my favorite folding 35mm cameras. These things are just so beautifully made. I just love the workmanship on some of these. The quality, they're just fantastic. And they take great pictures. So, you know, these are just some ideas if you're looking to have a 35mm folding camera that you can take with you when you're out and about. These are some great options. I know there's some plastic ones out there, like the Olympus XA and some of those that are pretty cool. Nothing against those at all. I just love the beautiful German engineering in some of these cameras. So anyway, that's my folding 35mm cameras. If you have any thoughts or comments, please don't hesitate to leave me a comment. And as always, thanks for watching.